Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Pokemon Trainer Aidan and welcome to another video from the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. And I apologise for the delay since I last did a video. I've been busy with being on holiday and various other things. In that time, the new expansion Furious Fists has come out and the yearly rotation has happened. The rotation was actually quite a big blow to a couple of my decks. Quite a lot of useful cards rotated out. Obviously there was Sableye rotated out and Dark Patch weakening dark type decks. Along with those, Tropical Beach rotated out, as did Level Ball and Heavy Ball, both of which I used quite frequently in a lot of my decks because they were very useful. But obviously with those not here anymore, got to start looking at other ways to get out those basic Pokemon with less than 90 HP. And also the evolutions, which have got 3 retreat cost or more and things. So I'll be playing quite a lot of Evo Sodas in a lot of my decks. I'll also probably be playing quite a lot of Pokemon fan clubs because they're very useful for getting out your basic Pokemon to begin with. Now, the deck that I'll be using in today's video is one that focuses on a card from the new expansion, and that is Mienshao. 90 HP Stage 1 Pokemon, evolves from Mienshao. The attack we'll be looking at mostly is Aero Turn. For 1 fighting energy, 40 damage, and return this Pokemon, all cards attached to it, to your hand. If you partner this with Pyroar, with the intimidating main ability, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon. If you're up against big EXs, obviously then your opponent can't do any damage to you. Obviously you're going to have to attach a Float Stone to Pyro so you can retreat him and go back to attacking with Mienshao in the next turn. Also playing a Trevenant with a Forest Curse ability, so that if you're up against a deck which uses evolutions and needs to use Evo Sodas and Rare Candies in order to get those evolutions out, you can stop your opponent doing that. I used to play a 2-2 Phantom Trevenant line, but I found that more often I was actually needing to use the Pyroar and the Trevenant, so I reduced that to a 1-1, and I put in a Mr. Mime, as Mienshao will get knocked out in 2 hits on the bench from a Darkrai's Night Spear or a Landorus's Hammerhead. Obviously Mienshao will take 3 hits, and if a Pyroar or Trevenant gets trapped active, then that could quite easily happen. Also playing a Sigilyph, as Mega EXs are not blocked by Trevenant's ability, but Sigilyph will block a Mega EX. Now, one thing I found out early on is that I always seem to be short of switching cards when I needed them, so I'm playing 3 switches and 4 Float Stones. That might seem quite a lot considering I'm probably only going to be needing 1 Pyroar, 1 Trevenant and maybe my Sigilyph during the game, but Startling Megaphone is out there and can quite easily get rid of those Float Stones and I can end up trapped. And since I don't play that many energies, only 2 basic fighting and then 4 of the strong energy, I do not have the energy required to be able to waste them on retreating Pyroar and Trevenant. Now, in order to make that 40 damage attack from Mienshao do more damage, we have the strong energy, as I said, doing an extra 20 damage. Also have the Fighting Stadium, doing an extra 20 damage if the Pokemon up against is an EX, and a Muscle Band doing an extra 20 damage as well, meaning that for 1 energy, if you're up against an EX and you have all those cards in play, you could actually be doing 100 damage for 1 energy, which will take an EX out in 2 hits. Unfortunately, it won't take out a Mega EX in 2 hits, so in those situations I would tend to just leave a Sigilyph active for an extra turn in order to get an extra strong energy onto Mienshao to do that extra 20 damage so that I can take out a Mega EX in 2 hits. Obviously if you're not up against an EX, you'll only be doing 80, but that's still enough to get rid of all, or pretty much all, non-EX Pokemon in 2 hits. obviously fighting type, fighting weak Pokemon will get taken out in one hit from Mienshao. Is obviously the weakness. Obviously to help, do play a Karina, can help get out Mienfoo or Mienshao, and then a useful item card. I also play 2 max potions in this deck, because whilst basic Pokemon EXs can't hurt Pyroar, he can still get damaged from Hypnotoxic lasers. They're obviously still a very big threat, and having the max potion there to heal off, let's say 90 damage from Hypnotoxic laser, will really annoy my opponent, as they'll be thinking, finally I'm about to knock the Pyroar out, and then I just fully heal him, and my opponent will get frustrated. Also, Trevenant will still take damage if my opponent's using, regardless of what Pokemon my opponent's using, and so to be able to heal him is quite useful. Also, he does have fighting resistance, which is an extra bit of an advantage against any of the big fighting decks, which are becoming very prevalent now. I also play 1 Sacred Ash, because quite often Trevenant will get knocked out and I might still need him later on, or Mienfoo or Mienshao might get knocked out if I have a bad start, which happens incredibly regularly with this deck. I never seem to get a really good start. It's quite slow getting going, this deck, which is one of its main weaknesses, but once it's had chance to get set up, it is very strong. For other supporters, I play 3 Colress, 1 Lysander, 2 Pokemon fan clubs, 2 Professor Sycamore, and 3 TNO. I would normally probably play 3 or 4 Sycamores, but in this deck, because obviously you get Mienfoo, Mienshao, Muscle Band, and hopefully the strong energy back into your hand after you attacked, you don't want to be using Sycamore and discarding those. So the other supporters in this instance tend to be a better option. Since this deck's quite slow to get going, you need to draw through cards quickly to begin with, which means you end up running low on cards in your deck very early on. And decking out is a big problem with this deck. If your strategy with this deck doesn't go quite according to plan and you end up with a Pyroar stuck active late on and all your Mienfoo and Mienshao knocked out and no Sacred Ash, as long as your opponent is using basic EXs and has less cards in their deck than you, you can win by decking your opponent out. That did happen to me in one game. I got really unlucky start and I was down 5 prizes quite quickly and had no way of getting a Mienshao into play. I was stuck with a Pyroar active. I could have benched something like Phantom, but if I had done, my opponent would have been able to knock him out because he was using Darkrai EX, would have been able to knock him out on the bench in 2 hits and win the game. But I just stuck Pyroar active and I managed to win through decking my opponent out. That is sort of the secondary strategy with this deck if the primary strategy fails. That's it for the overview of the deck, and now we'll get into a game. So for this game it looks like we have the advantage up against someone called Guy Diamond, and we get a choice whether to go first or not. I prefer not to go first with this deck because it gives me a chance to attack on my first turn if I go second, if I get the opportunity, which I have in this case because I started with Mienfoo. Got a Mienshao in my hand and a Pyroar, one with a Bicycle and an Ultra Ball, and one of my switchers. Unfortunately, my starting supporter is Colress, which isn't great. I prefer to obviously start with a Pokemon fan club, and even worse, my opponent is playing a Mewtwo EX. Now luckily I managed to top deck a TNO here, which I will play, and at this stage I will probably discard my switch and Bicycle in order to Ultra Ball for a Litleo. Mienshao will probably not survive very long with the weakness to Psychic, and then I'll leave my turn there. If I manage to get an energy next turn, I will attack with... well, I won't be able to attack because I miscalculated damage and everything. Unfortunately, I got another Colress, which will do absolutely nothing as there are no benched Pokemon. However, my opponent cannot hurt me because Mewtwo is obviously a basic and Pyroar's ability prevents that. Now, as I said, as we were looking through the deck, I do tend to get absolutely appalling starts with this deck. I have no idea why, I just do, and it's always a struggle to get going. I top deck a Great Ball, which I can use, and unfortunately only managed to get a Phantom, which is not much help here, and I'll have to pass the turn at that. My opponent, as you've seen, hasn't done anything for the last 2 turns, 3 now, since can't attack and doesn't seem to be drawing anything of any use. Now unfortunately, since I used the TCGO, I do have less cards in my deck, so if we get stuck at this stage, I will deck out before my opponent. My opponent benches a regular Yveltal and a Mew EX. Seems to be playing some variation of a Dark deck. And top deck a Sycamore, which is even worse use in this situation. Now here, just to try and get anything of any use, I am probably going to use Colress. It will only get me 3 cards and shuffle a heck of a lot more back into my deck, but I really need something. Unfortunately, I don't really get anything of any use, and I'll just pass the turn. If it turns out my opponent is only using basic Pokemon like EXs and the Yveltal, I will be quite happy, just sit here with my Pyroar active and hope that I can deck my opponent out. Now here I have an opportunity to Colress, and in fairness I probably, not Colress, sorry, Sycamore, in fairness I probably will, because I really need to get something at this stage. I will lose my Lysander and one of my max potions, but since my opponent hasn't played any Hypnotoxic Lasers yet, I don't think he will be, so I'm not too worried about that, and my opponent's only, by the looks of things, playing basics, so I don't think I will need to be healing. Now here I do manage to get quite a few very useful cards. Unfortunately no Pokemon in my top 7 cards. One of my Pokemon fan clubs is in there though, and my other max potion. I'll just pass the turn there. I do at least now have a Mienshao in play. And my opponent gets a Pokemon fan club, which will be beneficial for me because I have that Colress in my hand, which means I'll be able to Colress for 6 cards. See, my opponent playing an Eevee, so clearly has some non-basic Pokemon in his deck somewhere. Obviously don't know what evolution he's playing, but I'm sure we will find out at some stage. Since it seems to be all dark energies, I would assume he's therefore playing an Umbreon, but obviously don't know which one. Here I managed to get a Muscle Band, which is useful, but other than that, not getting anything of much use there. I do have a Pokemon fan club which I can use next turn if I want, but since at this stage, oh, my opponent plays a Leafeon, the Plasma Leafeon. Since at this stage I am more looking to try and get a Mienshao in play, I am probably going to use the Colress and hope to get one. Or I could use the Evo Soda and get one of my Mienshao out that way. Then I will still play the Colress. The Leafeon has 100 HP, but obviously because it's not an EX, I don't get the extra 20 from the Fighting Stadium. But if I attach a second Fighting Energy, I will be able to do 100 damage and knock out the Leafeon in one hit. I put my Pyro back active, and we're back to tied on prizes. Unfortunately, as I did only have the one Mienshao on my bench, I then can't attack on consecutive turns, that's why having a second Mienshao is very useful, because you can then obviously attack on consecutive turns, even if you only have one Mienshao. But here, since I have the Karina, I can get... I would have got another Mienshao out, but apparently I only have Mienshao. So I could use my Sacred Ash to get the Mienshao out of my discard pile, but I'd rather not, because that seems a bit of a waste. I'll probably Ultra Ball, so my opponent does have the Darkrai, and I want to get the Mr. Mime into play, as long as he's in my deck, which I really hope he is. I will here discard the Evo Soda, since that's not going to be much use, and the basic Fighting Energy, as that is also not going to be much use for me, and I get the Mr. Mime out, and then I will leave it there for this turn, and let my opponent have his turn. As you can see, I do have a lot less cards in my deck, only 20, my opponent's got 32. My opponent played 2 Crushing Hammers, managed to get heads on one of those flips, which is a shame, see I've lost one of my Fighting Energies, but I do have another one in my hand, and 2 more either in my prizes or in my discard pile. My opponent played a Rainbow Energy onto the Darkrai. Now here I don't particularly want to use TNO, as at the minute the only card I really need is another Mienshao. I don't have any in my deck, so I will just retreat and Aero Turn again for 100 damage. Obviously against Mew EX with 120 damage, if I can get 2 of the strong energies on, I can take a Mew EX out in 1 hit. My opponent uses a Pokémon Center Lady to heal 20 damage from the Mewtwo. My opponent sends up the Mew EX. Which will obviously still do no damage. I did manage to draw a second strong energy, so then next turn I will be able to Aero Turn for a knockout on the Mew EX if my opponent leaves him active. The opponent plays the Sharon for 3 cards. And here I can then Aero Turn with Mienshao for the knockout. And unfortunately for me, I got a Mienshao out of the prizes and not a Mienshao. So because of that, it's going to be quite slow. My opponent sends up the regular Yveltal, which will take a bit to knock out because he has the fighting resistance, and also, not being an EX, doesn't take the extra 20 damage from the Fighting Stadium. As you can see at this stage, another issue with this deck is that my hand gets chock-a-block full of cards that I don't necessarily at that moment in time need. Which is always a problem. N should have rotated out, but for some reason I still see people playing Ns in standard decks, which from what I can recall they shouldn't be able to, because N, the only prints of N were previous to Boundaries Crossed, so I am a little confused about that. Now here I don't want to play my Fighting Stadium, as I don't need to, and if my opponent thinks that I don't have another one, he might be a bit more confident. That was an Aero turn for 80 damage. Send the Pyroar back out. And unless he retreats into the Mewtwo, I should be able to get a knockout on him next turn. My opponent plays down a Zoroark, so I'll probably have a Zoroark in there somewhere. Which, obviously being fighting type, is of course weak. Sorry, being a dark type is of course weak to fighting, which could give me another massive advantage. Now here at this stage I'm thinking of maybe using my dowsing machine for a Chorus, as I do have all three in the discard pile and they're the only things I've got which will put cards back into my deck, but I think I'll wait a bit just to see how low my deck gets whilst the game progresses. Obviously here the game going quite slowly because I have not managed to get a second Mienshao onto the bench. One of them has been knocked out already and one of them is left in my prizes. Hopefully I'll be able to draw it off my next prize. It will come in very handy. Now here I didn't need to attach the second strong energy. I would have been able to do enough damage to get the knockout without it, but I thought I might as well anyway. And there's my other Mienshao. So I will now be able to start attacking on back-to-back turns and get knockouts more regularly. And obviously here, depending on which Zoroark my opponent is playing, will depend on what he's able to do. My opponent could be playing the Foul Play Zoroark, or could be playing the Brutal Bash one. Either way, I'm not too concerned, as I think neither of those will do enough damage to be able to cause my Pyroar any problems. Now, as you can see, my hand is absolutely massive, and my opponent plays another Crushing Hammer. As I was saying, you can see my hand is absolutely massive here. As I can get a second Mienshao powered up to be able to attack on consecutive turns. Get that knockout. Take my second to last prize, and my opponent here probably isn't much he can do. Sends up the Darkrai, which obviously I'll be able to knock out in one hit because of the weakness, unless he decides to not leave him active. But since I have my second Mienshao, I am not too concerned about not being able to win this. My opponent played a Pokemon Fan Club for an Eevee and something else which I didn't see, and he then hasn't played it. So obviously I don't know what that was. Now here I decided to attach second strong energy to the Mienshao. Didn't need to because I'll do more than enough. And that's strange. Oh, I forgot about... I forgot to play my fighting stadium. Typical. I knew I was probably going to make a mistake at some stage, I always seem to. Dear me. My opponent puts forward an Yveltal and has another Leafeon there on the bench. Now here, of course, I could attack the Yveltal, but I don't think I will. I will Evo Soda for my final Pyroar. Now here, because my hand is getting very full, I probably will get a Chorus just to put put some cards back into my deck. I'll probably discard the regular fighting energy and probably the Ultra Ball, since I have the Karina, so I'll be able to get out evolutions easier that way. I will play out a few more of my cards that are going to be useful here, including my Startling Megaphone to get rid of the muscle band my opponent has been attaching. And then I will Colress. It's actually only put my deck back up by 1 card, but that could be enough. I have a funny feeling my opponent will probably not leave the Gothitelle active, so I'm thinking about not attacking so that I can do an extra damage next turn, but I think I will still attack. I'll put up the non-damaged Pyroar. Obviously bench another Mienshao and evolve the current Mienshao to Mienshao. Now here I will definitely not attack. If I wait an extra turn, I'll be able to do 100 damage and get a knockout on the Gothitelle if my opponent leaves him active. If he doesn't, I'll still be able to do over 100 damage to whatever else my opponent puts out, which will of course allow me to get the win if it's the Darkrai or the Leafeon. So I'll just leave my Pyroar active. My opponent benches a regular Gothitelle, which could prevent me winning next turn if he puts him forward, but he hasn't. Put up the Mewtwo that has a lot of energy on him at the minute, 8. I've decided here that I will just attack with 1 energy on Mienshao in case my opponent decides to retreat into the Leafeon. Then I'll still be able to do enough damage to knock out the Leafeon. The only Pokemon my opponent has at the minute which will be able to survive is obviously the Gothitelle. My opponent clearly hoping to try and deck me out, but I hate to say it is not going to happen. I have enough cards in my hand to be able to get knockouts regularly enough, well, do enough damage to get knockouts in what's left. As now all I need to do next turn, attach, obviously evolve my Mienshao, attach Muscle Band, another Strong Energy, and obviously evolve, and I'll be doing enough damage, I should think, to knock out the Gothitelle. If I've done my maths correctly, I will be doing 80 damage, which will get the knockout. And there it is. Managed to get, in the end, a very convincing victory, my opponent only taking 1 prize. Thanks to him mostly playing basic EXs, and Pyroar obviously stopping my opponent from attacking. So that's all for this week's video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back later on in the week with some more videos. I will see you then.